Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can hear us okay. We do have a chat feature in this webinar. So if you can see the chat there, it's on the side of the screen on mine. It might be on the bottom of the screen on yours. I'm going to move this board. Everybody here, can everybody see us and hear us? Please post in the chat. Just move it down. There we go. Wow, this HD camera is pretty cool. Vasco, you need to come this way.
Yeah.
Everybody here, please comment and chat here. Thomas is here. Hi, Thomas. I love your yachts, by the way. I'm so kind of envious of wanting to use one of your yachts.
And this new post he put it on yesterday, where we could go into this website and see all these amazing yachts that he had for sale.
Yeah, I'd love to have a yacht. That would be fantastic.
Sadly, they don't accept monopoly money, Thomas.
So we're going to start in a couple of minutes. Just going to wait for a few more people to join in. This is being recorded. You'll get an email with the replay. So casino, maybe. This whole next hour and a half is primarily about helping you get the killer advantage, as we call it, over your competitors. And I've seen a lot of people get really frustrated and really kind of in a tailspin trying to figure this out. And in fact, just before this webinar, we actually had a call with a client that we went through a competitive process with them. Hi, Steve. So we went through the last year with this client, and we helped shape them up in terms of getting their competitive advantage. And the problem is for a lot of people is to get the competitive advantage actually isn't that hard. And I know that sounds really, really a strange thing to say. It is about positioning, and often you get out of alignment with where the market is, where your competitors are, where your customers are, and that's when you feel like you're banging your head against a brick wall. But when it slots into place, suddenly you get a wave of momentum and things start to happen. Now, there's no miracle cure. It still requires effort, still requires work. But once you get everything into alignment, things and your decisions start to become easier to make, and it becomes clearer. And that's when you start to put your competitors on the back foot, because you find a way to sell, even when, and my trademark example is, let's say, for an example, you're tendering and you've got 2 tenders. Somebody has to make a decision about those tenders. So there's a point scoring system or a decision-making system that they use. But ultimately, somebody has to decide, is this a 9 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10 tender? And that's when the humanity and the human nature comes into it. And often the competitive advantage is about human nature and how people work and the way people work and the feeling that we generate. We'd love to say that tech makes everything automated and easy and simple, but I don't believe that for a second. And I think often in many, many businesses, it's not necessarily just about the offer that you put in front of them. It's the way and the feeling you leave behind. So we're going to go through some things in the next hour and a half, and I would love you to have some questions as we go. Vasco's going to keep an eye on the chat, which is over there. And we're going to map out some things. But before we do that, some of the attendees, I do encourage interaction. So Steve and Thomas have commented, could you share with me what your business is in kind of like 2 or 3 lines in the chat, so I can see whose businesses are, and I'll make the examples relevant to you. If that's good, if you can do that, that would be fantastic. So the killer advantage, this is the way that you get a decision in your favor. Premium tea supplier, awesome. Leadership and management training, wonderful. Anybody else want to share? Thomas, I know you sell yachts. So that's good.
And ships, big ships.
Big ships, yeah. So there's Thomas. So here's here's a couple of things. So I talk about the 4 pillars, and I've written them down behind me, which is the customer, the competitor, the market, and the message. And I want to give you some examples of how you use large yachts only. If you've got a spare 80 foot, Thomas, that would be, just send it my way. I'm in Plymouth, so I can moor it here as well. The competitive advantage has 4 pillars: the customer, the competitor, the market, and the message. These are the 4 things that will help you identify how you leverage your business over and above somebody else's. So some of this is very, very basic, but when you get this, when you really, really get this, it will help you define things better. Now, I'm going to offend you all probably by going, you would say that your business is better than somebody else's because it's your business. So I don't believe you when you say that. And your customers won't believe you when you proclaim you're one of the leading. We've all seen one of the leading this and one of the UK's largest this and greatest that. Nobody believes those things. So part of the killer advantage is getting people to believe what you're saying. And you do that by not saying it. So we're going to go through the 4 pillars, and then I'm going to show you some examples of how that works in practice. So first things first. So your customer. Now, your customer has a number of challenges, issues, problems, frustrations. All of those things are going on. If you've been to any of my courses, one of the key things I mentioned about that is pain points, and pain points are essentially frustrations and sources of frustration within your customer and within their business. So you need to understand your customer really, really well. And I don't mean what you think the customer, what you think about the customer. I mean, you need to ask them. You need to find out all the information about why they do this. So in a leadership and management training, Steve, for an example, what are the key reasons that people even engage with leadership and management training? Now, I'm going to give some, and I don't pretend for a minute to be an expert on leadership and management. So if I get some of these and miss some, that's why. So leadership and management. Some people want leadership and management training because they actually want to grow as leaders and they want better managers. That is by far a massive thing. Some of them want to get better jobs. They want to be better managers where they are. Some of them want to be better managers somewhere else and better leaders somewhere else. And part of that process is to train them so that they can get that better job, albeit their company might think that they're on that course or that program that you're selling to be a better manager. For them, their agenda is a better manager for their future job. Then there are some people, and I'm sure, Steve, in this scenario, you will have come across some of this, but maybe not a lot. Some people will be going, actually, I just want to do something different. I'm fed up in my job and I want to do something different. So there will be lots of reasons why those people choose to buy from you and their understanding of why they buy. We've worked with a number of different businesses across lots of markets. Vasco, he doesn't look old enough. Come this way a bit, Vasco. Sorry. He doesn't look old enough, but in the 80s, Vasco worked for Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola, as you can imagine, and I'm going to let you tell the story here.
Which one?
Of New Coke.
Oh. So
every business is looking to innovate, and Coke actually landed a massive blow to themselves trying to get a further advantage in their business. So,
well, someone decided that, the Coke market is very limited. There are just 2 big companies, Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola. In the States, they're sort of, like 50-50 each, and they haven't been able to grow one over the other. And Coca-Cola came with this idea of doing a blind test of new tastes of Coca-Cola. And seems that everyone chose one sample Everyone wanted that one. So they decided to call the normal Coca-Cola, the classic Coca-Cola, and then the new Coke came into being. When everyone heard about that, this new, and another thing was that this taste was very similar to Pepsi. Less gas, more sugar. So when people heard about this, they said, hang on, we don't want this. We want the Coke. It doesn't matter if this tastes better. We want the Coke. And interesting enough, this was a huge blunder. Lots of millions were lost on this. Coca-Cola had to go back. I was involved in the middle of this. So I had hundreds of journalists ringing me at crazy hours from all over the world, asking me questions about how come we did this. And the thing is, someone had screwed up the line with this idea. Now, interesting enough, if you guys notice now, Coca-Cola has learned this lesson. If you look at Coca-Cola Zero now, they are slowly going to, the normal Coca-Cola will be Coca-Cola Zero. They're replacing this. And if you'll see the cans of Coca-Cola Zero, which were all black, now they're red, a little bit black on top. So they're going to go into this new market, which is a new Coca-Cola, because people don't want sugar, will be zero. But they learned the lesson before, which was a sudden transition. So even big companies like Coca-Cola can make huge, huge and expensive mistakes.
And it all comes down to knowing your customer. And in Coke's scenario, they didn't do the research well.
And they did it well in terms of an open scenario. They forgot their clientele, their real clients.
But the problem was they came at it with a presupposed idea that they wanted to introduce a new flavor.
Yeah.
So they did market research, which justified them adding a new flavor, but they failed to take into account the reaction people would have if Coca-Cola introduced a new flavor. So what I'm saying from this is you have to understand your customer, not as you understand them, but as the market understands them. Because the difference between, and let me just illustrate a point. If you're pitching for business or you're trying to, Karen is manufacturing and printing of books, Claire's luxury packaging and rigid paper carton. If you're in a war with somebody, another competitor, to get the sale, you won't lose or win by a huge margin. You will win on a tiny factors. It could be, a small margin of price, but we all know that people don't. There are some people who will buy on price, and usually they're the hardest work people. We have some clients who are very tough on price, and we respect that's the way. But often, not always, you find that the people who are fighting on price are some of the hardest people to work with and difficult to work with. Whereas there are those customers out there where, within reason, within a margin, and the margin will vary depending on your industry, price will not be the issue. It will be about the service and all of those things. But actually, for people to interpret whether the service is better, you've got to prove to them, not in their head, but in here, they have an instinct that your service is better. And that comes down to a lot of factors that are not actually to do with facts and figures and stats. Let me give you another example. People ask for testimonials. And references, and that you're part of this association and that association and the other association. And I once spoke to somebody and they said, we always take trade references. So if you think about this, who have you ever give a trade reference or a client referral to somebody who would give you a bad referral, or somebody who would give you a bad reference? You just wouldn't do it. It's like putting on your CV the boss that fired you. You just wouldn't do it. So once you've got an understanding of who your customer is, and it may well be that you ring a few prospects up and go, can I ask you a couple of questions? I'm not looking to sell on the call or anything. I'm just looking to find out some information, and find out the information. The more you find out, and the more removed you are from the people you ask the information from, is important, because we don't like to disagree with people. We don't like to tell people things that might be uncomfortable. So when you're talking to your clients and they say we're really happy and it's okay and it's great, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's true. It may mean that they're mildly satisfied, but they're saying, oh, everything's okay. And we read an okay as they're happy.
Yeah.
But an okay might be, it's all right. So we don't always tell people the truth. So if you find some people who have got no relationship with you altogether, prospects, and start to ask them key questions about their buying decisions and why they do things the way they do and what matters to them, it will really help shape how you communicate with them. Now, the next one of the pillars is the competitor. And we're going to go through this in very basic terms, and then we're going to put it all together into a very kind of thought-driven and strategic process. So the competitor, yeah, again, you will know your competitors. You will have a list of them. You've probably stalked them on social media, all of those things. But there are things about your competitor and there are weak spots on your competitor that you need to know. And the only way you will know them is by spending time looking at how your competitor does business. It's also worthwhile, by the way, is testing your competitor, getting them to put some speculative pricing together, getting their marketing collateral, pulling all of that together to see how they behave. And you may have to ask a friend to help you with that, or a friend in another business. We've helped some people in the past who've been looking to find out information about how their competitor conducts themselves. So it's really important that you understand the competitor inside and out. And don't go for the big things like, oh, they're 10% more expensive or they're further away. Look at the little things. Often when a business relationship goes sour, and if you want to win business, somebody has to lose business. So there's a reason why you win and they lose. And if they're the incumbent supplier, there's a reason why they will be losing business to you.
In fact, for example, in printing, people win business sometimes because of the price, but they lose business because of delivery times.
Yeah. So look at the competitor and start to list out their weak spots. And we're not looking for big gaping holes here, because the big gaping holes they'll be acutely aware of, and their customer will probably accept the fact that they've got big gaping holes. Like, for an example, if you've got a really cheap printers, but their service is horrendous, some people will make a decision to live with that because of the price. So you don't want to try and compete for them, but there will be niggles within that process that will make it worthwhile for you to. There will be niggles with the customer and the supplier and the competitor that you need to know. And these are little fractional things, tiny things. Like, for an example, how long does it take them to get back to you? How fast do they quote? How quickly can they respond? How easily accessible are you?
They turn around.
All of those things start to matter. Whether, in the print world, for an example, and Karen, you may come across this, and Claire, you may come across this, to be fair, that some printers, and I don't know your world specifically, I know color printed books are a bit more involved, and so is packaging, but I come from a print world, so I know print fairly well. We used to have a rule in one of the companies I was involved with where it was 20 minutes to turn around a quote. You had 20 minutes and that was it. Didn't matter what the job was, every quote had to be turned around in 20 minutes. The reason for that was a significant proportion of business was secured at speed because people needed something and needed it now, and people go for certainty. So if your target audience is a marketing department, for an example, marketing department value very different values to a purchasing department. Marketing is very much about the right people, the right product. Is it going to be in the right place at the right time? Probably having to cope with a bit of chaos, because marketing departments usually have that floating chaos around them because it's a crazy place to work. Purchasing department, more planned, more meticulous, more detailed, more straight lines, more easy to do. And in my world, when I was in the print world, marketing departments, if you bent over backwards for them, the price was never the issue, unless there was a massive budget cut. But most of the time, it wasn't that. So it was more about how could you handhold. So you start to think about the competitor and start to look at where are their tiny, tiny weak spots. And I'll give you an example of a strategy that's been used. It's been used in a lot of different places. It's called a lot of different things. I call it dispositioning. And this is really important as a strategy to use over your competitor. So once you've mapped your customer and your competitor, I'll talk to you about dispositioning briefly, and then we'll pull it together a bit later. So dispositioning is the premise whereby you undermine your competitor without speaking their name. So I'll give you an example in politics. If in a general election, both sides of both parties, the major parties, are telling people what they're going to do, but also rubbishing and critiquing what the other side say they're going to do. And it's about getting a message that sticks. So for an example, if you look back at Donald Trump, I know he's a questionable guy, and some people don't like him, some people love him, but he immediately pinned onto Hillary Clinton. She was crooked and it was corrupt and all these different things. And he threw them at her and they stuck, to the point where she ended up having to defend some of these things in public. She had to respond to them. That's called dispositioning. It's where you set the agenda. You can set the agenda with your customers if you know them well enough and you know your competitor well enough. So for an example, let's use a print job. That's print job's an easiest one. Thomas, I realize yours will be different, but I'll come back to yours in a little minute. You want a print job, some leaflets or something like that, and you're a busy marketing department and you just want it sorted because you've got a million other jobs to do. One of the key things you ask is, if you're going to labor on speed and helpfulness, is you lay down what you can deliver and the pace you can deliver first. So if she said, I need the leaflets and I need them tomorrow afternoon. Okay, tomorrow afternoon isn't a problem. Where's the position on the artwork? Do you need artwork creating? We can make it, or do you have it ready? Yeah, that's no problem. I can get this done for you. If you can sign this off, I can get this done for you for tomorrow. In fact, if you want, I might be able to get it done earlier if you need it, just to give you a bit more time. So immediately I'm setting the agenda that I'm going to deliver at that pace. Then you can say, well, hands down, we know we can do this. Our core business is delivering for this. And, you know, you can go online and get it and they guarantee it will be there. But, you know, at the end of the day, you've got to be able to speak to somebody and whether you can get it through. So I sow a seed of doubt about other people being able to deliver at the pace we can deliver. Another way to do this, and we've seen this in waste management, and this is probably a more clear example, is it in the waste management sector, there are certain regulations that your waste, commercial waste from, you know, wheelie bins and stuff, has to be zero to landfill. By that, I mean it's either incinerated and used for energy or it's recycled. So everything commercial waste has to go into one of those sectors. It's either reused or it's incinerated for energy. So they're the two things that happen with our commercial waste. Very, very, very little now goes to landfill. So one company decided that they were going to major on this zero to landfill. So let me just clear this up. Every company, every waste company, commercial waste company, is zero to landfill. They don't put any waste into a landfill anymore. There's, you know, chemicals is different, but commercial waste, it's zero to landfill. But this company decided that they were going to label themselves as a zero to landfill company, and they marketed themselves as zero to landfill company. Now, every company is zero to landfill, but they majored on the fact that they were zero to landfill. They became the green waste management company. So when they're going to see people, we're zero to landfill, we're great for the environment, we're competitive on price, not the cheapest. They're not the cheapest, actually, but they're competitive on price, and we're a great ethical environmental company. Fantastic. That's a great credential.
And even on all the printed material, 0 to landfill.
Everything.
Strapline.
The trucks, the work, 0 to landfill. So then a major competitor, well, in fact, one of the market leaders decided to come onto their turf and announce that they were 0 to landfill too. So you think, well, okay, what does that mean? They were, every time that the competitor then chased business, they said, oh, so you're like them now, are you? And I went, no, we've been like this for years, but we just didn't tell anybody. And it became a catch up because they'd set the agenda. They'd set the tone of it. So for an example, Thomas, in your world, if you've got a very fierce competitive market, there may be avenues where you can explore how you do something very, very different. How do you source yachts differently? Is it the fact that you can get things better and easier than other people? Is it that you know more people? In which case, should you be setting yourself up as the go-to man without saying it? So you wouldn't call yourself the go-to man, but would you weave that message that you are the go-to person to find yachts or give
or ships?
Oh wow, what happened then? Are you the go-to man? So you start to look at. Sorry, the camera just slid. Then, guys, you have to set up based on the customer, what the customer wants, what the customer niggles are, and what your competitors' weak spots are. So, for an example, Thomas, I've seen a lot of. I'm down in Plymouth here, so we've got some smaller yacht companies and yacht brokers and things like that. And you look at it and you don't know that they know what the boat that they're talking about. It looks like they're selling a house, and it's like a lead thing. Oh, we've got this one. Could you be the person that can find what isn't available? Can you source things and then set that message that you can find things so that then people are drawn to you more tightly?
Quality of offer, everything that's I've been seeing from Thomas. All his ships and all his yachts are top notch. Yeah. Really, really amazing.
I'd have one if I could afford one. But it's about knowing the competitors and finding their weak spots and making their weak spots your talking points without referencing them. So if I know a competitor's really weak at follow-up, I first of all would be better at them than follow-up. But I will also say one of the things we take seriously as a company is follow-up. So I'm not going to pester you, but I will keep in touch and tell me you need us or you don't need us. Is that fair? And the customer will say, yeah, that's fair. What I don't want to do is leave you waiting for something or pass some information to you and then you waiting for weeks, because I know how that feels. It's a common issue in our industry. I will be as proactive because I want you to have it. And if that's too much, you just say, chill, I'll come back to you, and that's cool. And immediately, it's not the fact that I'm saying I'm going to follow up. It's the fact that I'm leaving people with the thought that they're not going to follow up or that they're going to be too pushy in the follow-up. So that's an example. Another example which works really, really well in dispositioning is about quality. So for an example, if you know that one of your competitors' product is not as good as yours, you can say we've got one of the best products in the market, which is great, but people don't believe us generally. So they're more inclined to believe something about somebody else that we say than they are to believe us about what we say about us. So if you discredit the competition directly, people will not like that. It's a very bad thing to do. But you can discredit them indirectly. So for an example, I'll use the financial services as an example, independent financial advisors. So if there's tons of them, what makes anyone different? How do you know what's better or worse? So I'll put my Mr. Financial Advisor hat on. In our industry, there's a lot of financial advisors with lots of different preferences and biases. we have to be independent, of course, and we have to give you the best advice. But what I'm looking to do really is find what really does work for you, and find the best thing that works in your particular circumstances. Now, everybody's supposed to do that, and I'm sure they try and do. But what's important to me is that you are happy with what you've got, the investments that you're going to make, so that then you will tell other people how great we've done, and I will get more business because I look after you really, really well. So that's what's important to me. So I'm not here to sell you anything I get great commission out of. I'm looking to get you the right financial plan for you as my customer. And what you get will be different to everybody else because everybody's circumstances is different. Now, I will do that from an impartial point of view. And if you're welcome to go and look around elsewhere. But I really believe in being impartial. Everybody's got to be impartial, guys, in that world, in the financial service. Everybody's got to be impartial. They're not, though, are they? We're really not. So I'm sowing seeds to the customer that other people may not be as impartial as me. But I'm not saying that person or this company or that company. So I'm not casting any blame or throwing anything out there. So that's a way of dispositioning. You set an agenda that's completely different to the other people that sets you apart or gives you that little bit of an edge. So the next pillar is the market. So where the market is, you have to, again, do this. If you want to do really, really well in this, and I'll talk again about the call we had before we started this. This company had been around. They've done really, really well. They've been around for 7 years, done really, really well, got to nearly 500,000 turnover. And we're like, where do we go from here? And when we went through this process with them, albeit it was over a day, we went through this, pulling things apart. They were constantly looking for very analytical areas where they could compete more strongly. And it wasn't down to analytics. I think probably if you're in business, you've probably mastered how to do your business. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be around. You'd go out of business. It's little nuances that just make the difference. And sometimes we talk in a way that doesn't convey the right messages to the customer. And that comes from a lack of understanding of the customer's position, the competitor's position, and then the market itself. Now, we can know the market by facts, stats, and figures, but what does the market feel like? How do you demonstrate that you're a leader in the market without either doing one of two things? Some people who lead the market just end up looking really expensive and inapproachable. So I can remember a couple of years ago, I owned a marketing agency, which I got rid of because I hated it. I didn't hate the doing the customers, but when it takes you away from the work that you really love doing. And for me, it's this stuff. So we got rid of the agency. But one of the things I found afterwards is many of our target customers wouldn't approach the agency because they thought we might be too expensive. And sometimes when you push yourself as a progressive and leading business, you actually isolate yourself from customers because they think you're too expensive and that you wouldn't possibly take their work. So it's really important you define the market that you're looking to do and communicate to them clearly. If you read website copy, and I was going to do a demo here, but I might get myself in trouble if I critique some people's websites because this video might end up somewhere. But I've read so many websites and it doesn't actually tell you what they do or who they do it for. So for an example, the brag pieces. Yeah, we all love the big logos on our website. We've got a ton of them as well, and I'm sure you have as well, of where you've done great work for some big companies. The problem is, right, if you're not a major blue chip company looking at your website and you see all those logos, you have immediately alienated them from saying, oh, you're not for me. So you have to really focus in on who's your core customer and make sure your messages to the market are there. So if your target is, a company with 100 staff or less, and they go on and see Lidl's and what have you, and Asda's and what have you, they will go, whoa, these guys are the big boys. They can't do business with us. And even if they make an inquiry, that thought will still be in the back of their mind. Are these guys going to be too big for us? For two reasons. We've all experienced being the unimportant customer, haven't we? We've all experienced being the unimportant customer. And it's much better feeling when you feel like you're the important customer. One of our suppliers said to us, or said to Vasco the other day, that we were their biggest customer. And that was like it was a rewarding feeling. So people like to feel that they're contributing to your business. You don't want a customer where they know that they own your ass, but you don't want to be in a position where they think they're not important. So without being desperate and begging and pleading. So understanding the market that you're serving, the core market you're serving, and make sure every piece of communication matches to them. Because if we send a brochure, and this has been a conventional thought process here, if we send a brochure and have all these great logos of all the companies we work with, they go, wow, you're such a great company, probably too great for us. Or the vice versa goes, your historic customer has been smaller businesses and you've started to get some big business, and then you look at it and it reads like it's talking to small businesses and they go, they're not big enough.
Yeah.
So you need to understand the market that you're looking to operate in. What are the issues of the market? What are the problems in the market? So for an example, in the marketing world, and this is a relevant example, and I'd say this to an agency or anybody in the marketing world, one of the big problems is marketing people do not set realistic expectations when they're promoting their business. So what we tend to do is we're so good at marketing ourselves, we leave clients with unrealistic expectations. And then what happens is the client gets disappointed. Now, I'll give you a big example of this. In the marketing world, retained service is like the golden gem. So if you can get retainers, it's like really good work. We had an agency here that was 100% retainer, well, maybe 95% retainer. So it was a very desirable position to be in. But one of the problems is that when you build this, you've got to keep the client's expectations in check and consistent across the whole life. Some months it's quiet, some months it's busy, some months it's crazy. But
there's one thing in common in all of them. They all thought that they owned our asses.
Yeah.
So, we were their slaves, basically.
So when the marketing world is so good at selling, the retained service, there was an industry report about retained services. And it came from clients of agencies, not agencies themselves. And it found that nearly 45% of all agency clients had cancelled retainers because of a dissatisfaction of service. 45%. So you look at that and go, marketing people are really bad at managing expectations and caring for clients. And I would say to you, correct. It's a massive issue in that marketplace. So if I wanted to exploit that, I would tell clients about that statistic. So I would say, I need to make, the marketing world, for an example, 45% of clients in the marketing world that come onto retained services, this is industry-wide, 45% of them actually drop out of retained services because of disappointment, unrealistic expectations. So whilst I want to exceed your expectations, I want to be really clear on what we're going to deliver for you, because I want you to be part of the 55% that really love retained services. So it's for us together to make this successful for your business and for our relationship. That is a massive, powerful message where I'm exploiting vulnerabilities in the market which and saying, I want this relationship to be different to those problems. Now, what happens when I start to talk about market problems and openly, transparently talk about market problems and literally share? Now, some people think it harms the sales process. It really doesn't. It demonstrates trust in you and doubt in everybody else. So if I start talking about the issues of retained services in the marketing world, I start raising it and saying how I want this to be a successful relationship for them, for us, and be really clear on what we're going to deliver to make sure that we hit all the numbers that we need to hit and we get a really flying start to this relationship. If I talk about that as part of the sales process, then another marketing agency comes in and doesn't mention it at all, what doubt have I put into the client's mind? Do these people understand the problems of retained services versus not? I've created a doubt position in the competitor. Now, if I say this enough, and if I go on social media and talk about these issues, I become a leader. I've developed a leadership position because I'm talking about the issues. So Thomas, in your world, I'm sure there are pitfalls and dangers in your market that are common. I'm sure there are disappointments, frustrations, industry problems that affect customers. And as you start to identify these, talk about them. Talk about them. I wouldn't for a minute try and get involved in the yacht world because I'd probably make a dog's dinner of it. But I can relate to the print world and I can relate to leadership and management training. And
there's another one which tea
Premium
supplier.
Tea. So Premium Tea, Joanne, I work with actually a client on an ongoing basis, and we're helping them launch their business onto Amazon, and they do
Taiwanese tea.
Taiwanese tea. And it's the tea type is very
oolong.
Oolong. It's a very unknown tea in the Western world. So we're trying to introduce a product that very few people know, whereas matcha and green tea and all of those things are in place.
But it's really a premium tea because it's very expensive.
It's very, very expensive. So we're trying to carve out a space for something that's brand spanking new. And in the print world, you have something similar. You will have downsides in the children's books. For an example, I've done a lot of stuff in my life. So I can relate to this one, Karen, for an example. Many, many years ago, I used to source children's books and illustrated books from China, and they were printed in China and brought back into the UK. And it wasn't massive runs, like 10,000 runs and 20,000 runs. And I did this for a number of years. And the biggest problem with dealing with the Chinese suppliers was understanding the cultural barriers. So if, say, for an example, I was looking to be a sourcer and say, I'm going to be the middleman to help you buy from China, I would say, China, the pricing is fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Maybe not as it was, but the issue is the logistics of managing China are quite complex, i.e. the comms, you have to be quite forthright in the comms, and instructions have to be really clear. And there's a lot of back and forth and logistical issues that can really mess up. And I can remember one example whereby the communication was so difficult at the point that I had to just be very, very forceful and say, do this. And if you were new to that world, you would struggle. So if I wanted to sell that as a service, I would sell it not necessarily on the basis of the cost savings from China, although that plays a part. I would be pitching that my service bridges that gap between China and the UK to allow competitive savings, but actually deals with all the hassle that goes with buying books from China. So all of these points you probably have got so far. And then the message, the fourth pillar is the message. And the message is combining the understanding of the customer, the understanding of the competitor, the understanding of the market, to then create your message to them, to the customer, to the outside world. And when you craft that together, so for an example, Thomas, if your market is full of, shyster people, and, I don't know, but there's a lot of 2-bit people in there, you labor the point of that. If there are a lot of people out there that are selling stuff that's dodgy or doesn't work or is just, I'm thinking like cars because I can't comprehend the boat market, the yacht market. But if it was selling cars, for an example, they clock cars.
But you can sort of, relate to very expensive luxury cars with very expensive luxury yachts and ships.
Yeah. And in that scenario, they want our man Thomas, the man who we know what we're going to get. We know he's going to do a good job making sure that we're not buying crap. We're going to get the price that's right. And again, depending on where your revenue stream comes from, if your revenue comes from the sale, as in from the seller rather than the buyer, you need to leverage your advantage to the customer, whichever the customer is. So, for an example, if there's a lot of dodgy people in the market, okay, great. There's a lot of dodgy people in the market. How do I exploit that? What are the vulnerabilities? What are the concerns that people would have? A bit like hiring a builder. Yeah, this is a great one.
It's a nightmare.
Everybody worries about hiring a builder. Everybody worries about hiring a builder. Why? Because we've all heard about, maybe not experienced, but we've heard about horror experiences of builders where they've done something that's not been right. They've overcharged. I love cars, but I'm not very practical at all. So I've always worried about taking my car to the garage. Are they fixing something that doesn't need fixing? All those kind of things. So if I was pulling all of this together, my customers need cars fixing. My competitors, some of them are big chains like Quick Fit or those kind of things. So they can be a bit kind of, they're great, they're uniform, but they're not competitive and they're not very personal. They don't know your car. Yeah. So they don't know your car. You go in and you might see one guy and the next time you might see another guy. So I would position myself as we're straightforward. There's a lot of dangerous and questionable people out there fixing cars that don't need to be fixed. And we get the job done. And if I was pitching to a fleet manager and saying, we're not going to fix something that doesn't need fixing, you're going to have somebody to talk to who knows the vehicles, who knows you and gets the job done. And we're not going to be this generic chain business that you just tear your hair out trying to get things dealt with and trying to get copy invoices and all that stuff that needs to be done. So we're straightforward. We're down to earth. What you see is what you get. We're not going to bullshit you and we'll do a good job. Now, I've done very, very rough language there, but I've convinced probably some of you, and if you're cynical, maybe none of you, I've convinced you that I'm better than a chain, and I've also convinced you that there's other people out there who are going to shaft them, which in that market they would.
Yeah.
And Thomas, your business area might be the same with all sorts of stuff going on. I don't know. I can imagine it being very much like that kind of world where you don't know what you're buying and you need to get some expertise. So when I start to put these 4 pillars together, I come back with weak spots, and you can draw them as a diagram and list all the weak spots. So what's the vulnerabilities and concerns of the client? So in a luxury packaging, for an example, there's a couple of things that go on there. One, they're getting the best value. Best value is always important. Not the best price, but the best value. But then the creativity that goes with it, the uniqueness that can go with it. All of those things can come together. Confidentiality, depending on what you're doing, Claire, there might be sensitivities to confidentiality. I know, for an example, this is a funny story. So John Lewis get their own prints made for all of their furniture and wallpapers and all that kind of stuff. And I know I won't give too much away because I might land somebody in trouble, but I also know that the roll ends of all the materials that they were producing for John Lewis were sold off.
Oh,
yeah. Despite not being allowed to, they were sold off. And literally some smaller companies were recovering non-John Lewis stuff and with John Lewis prints. So by all to the eye, it looks like John Lewis product because it's only a John Lewis print. Yeah.
Oh.
So they were selling all this odds and ends. And Claire, I don't know whether this is common in your industry or anywhere like that. That is of major sensitivity to John Lewis. I don't know whether they ever found out about this.
I think there's another thing you should address here, which is the pain points of your client.
Absolutely. So if you've not been on one of my courses, pain points are really critical to understand. And it comes into the understanding of the customer as well, is we're all wandering around and wondering about how do we do this? How do we do that? And we have frustrations. So most of us don't take action on something until it becomes so unbearable that we have to do something. So most people won't change supplier unless something dramatic happens. And it becomes either a source of pain. So that could be a price point pain. It could be a service point pain, or it could be, a relationship point pain. You really just don't get on with the person who you have to deal with. So this is in terms of clinching somebody away from somebody else. You will have pain points that your clients or prospective clients will have pain points and sources of frustration with their current competitors. And these will start to niggle. And when you start to show your prospects that you don't have those pain points, they will more entertain you, or they will entertain you. They will give you an opportunity.
Because people change faster with pain than with pleasure.
Yes, absolutely.
So, this is the thing, if everything's going well, if everything's good, if you're selling them a good idea, they're okay. But if you want change, it has to be a pain. If it hurts, it goes.
Happy customers don't change. And when we talk about happy customers, it's not a happy buyer, it's a happy customer, because the buyer may not have any control over the purchasing, i.e., for an example, if the purchasing department decide that they want to trim costs and your point of contact goes, I'm really sorry. It's great that your point of contact's happy, but it's whether the organization's happy. A happy customer is the happy company. So many people have lost business because they've done a good job, but they didn't realize that further up the tree, there was issues. So understanding pain points that your competitors are generating and pivoting on them really, really matter. And that's where a meaningful conversation with your prospective buyers really does matter. Not to sell them, to find out the hurts. Where do you think this kind of service could improve? We know you're a great user of the service. We know you don't work with them, and that's fine. We'd love to work with you, but what we're trying to do is look at our own business and see where are the things that we could improve, and what advice could you give us as a prospective customer. Now, if that's a conversation, that's really easy to do. If you do it as a survey, nobody bothers with surveys. Think about those pain points. What are the pain points? So is it time? Is it lead time? Is it money? Yeah. Now, I'm not saying you become the cheapest, because that's a race to the bottom. But is there another way that you can compensate for the best value option? Is there something that makes your offer more worthwhile than, say, for an example, somebody else who's the same or similar price? So it may well be you bolt something into the sale as opposed to take something off the price.
I'm going to push you on this one. Sorry about that. I think you guys are going to gain a lot from this. The other thing is, talking about the offer, is how do you taste?
Yes.
How does your company taste?
Yeah. This is, again, a scenario we've just done with somebody recently. Is we've looked at what is the experience that we are giving to people. What's the flavor? So, for an example, in a sales process, if you think about this strategy, and this is a really easy strategy, you have to know the 4 pillars. If you don't know the 4 pillars that you're going to build this on, it will come apart. But this is sea, air, and land. And it's not sea as in water, Thomas. Yeah, sorry, that was a very, very lame joke. It's see with your eyes, air, and land. So let me give you some examples. So if you're trying to develop a relationship with a business, you've mapped out the customer, you've mapped out the competitor, you've mapped out the market and the message. So you start to know the key points that you need to deal with, whether it be service issues, whether it be the issues with the competitor. You've mapped all of them out and you've listed them out and go, where are the spots that we can pick that we can overemphasize as buying points, reasons why people choose us over somebody else. So, and then we go into sea, air, and land. If you've got companies that you want to do business with, they have to have seen you somewhere before anything else. So spend time making sure that your list of top 100, top 500, top 1,000, whatever, have seen your business. They've seen you somewhere, not directly, not through a phone call, not through an email, but they've seen you, whether it be advertising, whether it be something like that. They're aware you exist as a company. They know of you. And then the air is, have they heard of you? Have they heard as something? Are you around their space? Have you been in the spaces that they're in? Have you attended events that they've been there? Have they seen your logo on places? Have you sponsored something? Are you in the industry magazines that they read? All of those things. See you. They've seen you. They've heard about you. They've maybe read something about you, press article or whatever, before you try and land any kind of meaningful stuff. So the land is the direct stuff. I'm going in for the kill. I want a meeting. I want this. I want that. So C is make sure they've seen you. They know you exist. Air, that they heard about you. They've interacted with you. They've seen a brochure. They've seen your sponsorship of something. They've come to your exhibition stand. You've been in their space. You've been in their environment. You've interacted in some way without a sale conversation. And then land, which is the direct sales conversation. The reason this CR land strategy works so well in sales and marketing is because if somebody's more familiar, you can demonstrate credibility without having to justify in the space. So let me give you an example. You pick up the phone and start cold calling. Yeah. You start cold calling, picking up the phone, and you get a hit. You get somebody who's looking for some carton packaging, and they send you a quote, and you're in the running, but you're having a good dialogue, but it comes down to it, you don't get the job. The reason you didn't get the job might be price, but 9 times out of 10, they will favor somebody who they already know. They'll favor somebody they've already heard of, because it throws up a whole load of questions about, can these people do what they say? How do I know that? How do I justify that? All of those different things. So if you've built up that demonstrated credibility, if you've mapped all your customer, competitor, market, and message, and know the weak spots before you try and go in for the kill, you will find that all of those kind of credibility issues kind of pull away. Those kind of those validators, when you're trying to work out, is this a good deal? Is this not a good deal? They're kind of dealt with. So air, sea, and land or sea, air, and land is very much about that kind of building the trust before you've even met them. So if you list out your top 100 customers you want to do business with in the next year, then you start to look at these key 4 pillars of things that you need to be talking about. Whether it be dispositioning, whether you know that there's a massive issue in the marketplace. If you know there's a massive issue, start to think about how you can use the massive issue in the market and talk about it with the prospective customers. If you know that there's a major service issue that people have, so for an example, in the cleaning world, let's pick cleaning, commercial cleaning. Everybody probably knows that they've had a cleaning company that didn't do the job properly. I know that. I'm sure you do. So a system that addresses that problem. So for an example, I'll be the sales guy now for the cleaning company, multiple personalities. So, we recognize that, you're paying for a service and you've got an expectation of how you want your premises to be cleaned and the working environment that you want. So what we have is we have this policy where if you are ever dissatisfied with any element of the cleaning, we want you to let us know, and we will be back straight away within 2 hours, and we will get it fixed. No questions asked. Yeah. Now that's like a 30-day guarantee. 30-day guarantee. If you've seen them on any internet marketing thing, they look horrific, but they give people enough confidence just to tip them over a little bit. It's not a massive thing that you have to do to win business over your competitor. You just have to tip the scales a little bit in your favor, just enough. So if that's a concern, and you put that in place, that you have a 2-hour remedy guarantee or whatever, and you talk about it and you say, we know in this industry that, you know, we've got a great team of people who've been with us for 4 or 5 years, and we really committed to what we do because we know how much the working environment matters. But we recognize you may have had a bad experience, a bigger company perhaps that was using casual staff or what have you. We put this 2-hour remedy guarantee in place because we know that it matters to you, and we don't want there to be any dissatisfaction. So we will go that one step further and make sure, so we have this 2-hour or 4-hour or whatever guarantee or promise, what have you. They work brilliantly in retail environments, but they also work brilliantly in B2B environments, because then when they look at the next people, they start to go, well, they don't have that. Why do they not have that? And you're creating doubt. Hopefully I'm making sense here, that there's a lot of psychological stuff to do with the sales process that makes the difference. Yes, you need a great brand and marketing collateral and charismatic, far more charismatic than me salespeople. But there's a lot of little tiny things that are if you slot them in place, they suddenly help transform what you're doing. And we've seen one particular client we worked with last year feeling stuck and frustrated and not knowing where to go with this. And then they mapped everything out in very, you know, it's not rocket science to do this, but they started to ask the right questions of themselves. Why would people buy from me? Why would people buy from me? Who cares? Why? Just ask yourself why. And you know, all the kind of buzzwords that we use, we're trained now to cut through bullshit and see bullshit for what it is. So have a look at your website, have a look at all the things that you're saying and go, who are we? Why us? Why? And you get your why from all of those 4 sections, or the first 3. What's the problems in the market? What's my competitor doing? What's their problems? What are my customers' frustrations, and what are the prospective customers' frustrations? And fix them and talk about them. And when you talk about them as an industry and your commitment to be better. If you're committed to be better than the problems of the industry, then you're going to win. Because inadvertently, even if hypothetically, let's say your service is shit, your prices are really low, and your product's shit. Let's assume that they're all shit. And let's say your competitors, Vasco's giggling away here. Let's say your competitors are the same or marginally better. So you're winning work because of price. They're winning it because of quality. Let's say, for an example, you go, right, stop. We're going to change our message completely. I'm not advocating you do this, by the way, because it's disingenuous, but I'm going to make a point with it. So your company's shit, your product shit, your service is shit, but you're cheap. You reposition, yeah, and let's assume you're not massively known internationally, you're not a big brand or anything, and you go, we recognize, you know, there's a lot of shit service, a lot of shit product out there, and cheap prices, and that's great if you want a really cheap price, but if you're not happy with the stuff you're getting, what's the point? So we've really invested in our quality systems and making sure it works, and really pulled away from what the industry's been doing into doing shit. I've just talked to you. I've still got a shit product. I've still got shit service, but I've got a good price. But I've positioned myself that I'm better than everybody else, and I will be believed because that's how we work.
But interesting enough, Going back to the phone call we
Don't
got
do that,
this
by the
morning.
way. Don't do that.
We had a client, and the one that we talked today about, they had a shit logo,
Yeah.
rubbish positioning, crap place where they were working. They had to borrow meeting rooms to talk to us. They were going the wrong way, having the wrong speech, and they've changed now everything. The logo went to a weird color, which we won't even tell you about.
But let me bring a point about the logo.
They changed everything.
It's a bigger point than just the logo here. This is not about the logo, but it's a good way to illustrate the point. They created a logo to show that they were professional, quality, all of these different things that they put into the logo.
And they look like accountants.
They look like accountants. When we did some research with them, we asked people, we went back and said, what do you think of this logo? But we did it without them being involved, so that nobody would give them, yeah, it's okay, because they didn't want to hurt the feelings or upset them. And it came back that they looked very expensive. They looked a bit too big.
Yeah.
And they didn't look very aspiringly creative or funky. And this is a
And then we asked him, what do you think these guys do? And everyone said something
accountants
else.
Or lawyers. They do nothing like that. They're a marketing agency, and they were wondering why they couldn't win business any faster. So we went back to them and said, look, your positioning's way off. We went through this process with them of identifying all this stuff, really drilling down, and we went into really massive detail. I mean, this is an hour and a half, so we can't go into massive detail, but we drilled down with them on this and said, look, you've got to reposition yourself. And all they've done is the work that they're doing, the service they're delivering is absolutely the same. Nothing on that side has changed. So the business fundamentals is, they're a good company. They're great. They do some amazing work. But that fundamental business element hasn't changed. What's happened is the packaging that we've
How they present themselves.
How they're presenting themselves and the key messages. They've had some amazing wins. They're hiring more people.
And the people in the company, they talk different.
Yeah, the whole culture of the business has changed because they've thought differently about these 4 elements. Because what they've been trying to do is present one thing, but by doing that, trying to present one thing, they've actually presented something very, very different. And this goes back to how you messaged and how you communicate with people, that it isn't bad to say bad things. By that, I mean negative points of the market, because that demonstrates that you're conscious of those and trying to challenge those. So to have the killer advantage, you have to know all the flaws of your industry, the flaws of your competitors, and the problem, pain points and frustrations of your ideal customers. And then once you've got them, you can start to see commonalities that you can map out. And you can literally draw it on a whiteboard like this and create 4 lists. And then once you've got the 4 lists, you start to go, well, which are the ones we're going to pick off? And from your research, you will know what are the most common ones, because the common ones will start to be repeated by lots of different people. And I'm not asking you here to go on to a massive exercise where you spend months and months and months on, market research. Literally go, right, I'm going to do this in a day. And people question me about doing things in a day, but you can do things quite quickly when you know when you want to. And at the end of the day, any sales strategy or marketing strategy, you have to be able to retain it in your head. Because if you're a salesperson here, you have to sell instinctively. You walk in a room and meet somebody, yeah? We all have our predefined lines, don't we? We have our conversation starters. Mine are a bit clunky because actually on a one-to-one, I'm not very good. In a large group, I come alive, but in a small group, I'm like this timid person. So we have these lines that we spin out, yeah? You need to be able to have your sales and marketing strategy in sentences that you can spin out. Because if you don't, guess what? You'll just whittle on and go, why did I even say that? Or you'll say the stuff that you've always said. You'll speak in a language that you've always done. So I like every strategy that we do, we try and have it as a one-pager with key messages and key things and key actions and key points. Because if you don't have it as a one-pager, you just throw it in the bin. So, or it'll just gather dust in a filing cabinet and you'll never use it anyway. So these 4 elements you have to understand and then put them together in a really concise and clear way so that you're exploiting the vulnerabilities of the market and using the vulnerabilities of the market to show that you're better than the rest of the market. And hopefully you all are. But you can exploit it by just saying how using the vulnerabilities of the market and the vulnerabilities of the competition. And these vulnerabilities could be tiny, tiny things. Going back to the waste management example earlier, there was no difference. There was no difference between the 2 providers. I'm sure there was differences in the way they do things, but your bin's emptied. There was no difference. They just exploited one key element that nobody else was doing and talked about it and talked about it and talked about it until they became known for something that everybody else does, but they were the people known for it. And depending on what you're doing and the markets and customers you're serving, there may be a vulnerability in your market that you can exploit and talk about. It may be that there's a fact in your market that nobody else is using. And it only needs to be a tiny, tiny thing, but suddenly you start to set the agenda. And there's a great thing in a film, a political film, where, and this is a really horrific example, but I'll give you, it explains the waste management example really, really clearly. It was, you may have seen the film Our Brand is Crisis. And it's about 2 political campaigns. And Sandra Bullock decides, and this is very underhand political tactics, where Sandra Bullock decides to leak a message that her opponent had been involved in Nazi Germany, or was a supporter of Nazi Germany, or appreciated the leadership of Adolf Hitler or something like that. And people were asking it, why would you want to leak that? Because we know it isn't true, and he knows it isn't true, and everybody knows it isn't true. And Sandra Bullock says, I want him to deny it because it sets an agenda. I'm not saying you go to those extremes. What I'm saying is, if you find those key points and labor them, other people will be asked about that question. Are you able to do this? Can you do this? So you set waste management, 0 to landfill. Find your 0 to landfill in your market. What is that thing that everybody else does, everybody else can do, but you labor that point that you do this? Find the bits that are the weak spots of the market. Find the weak spots of the competitors so that you can talk about those issues openly and transparently and say, this is why it's important to us that we do this right for you, because this industry, our industry, has had these challenges, and we've worked really hard to make sure that we give the best customer service, because we know that follow-up and customer service in our sector is horrendous. And when you've got a big job going, when you've got 1 million cardboard boxes being made for perfume, you want to know that it's going to turn up on time. You don't want to be waiting for hours to know whether it's going to be there on time. You want instant tracking. You want to know the logistics are right. You want to know the color matching is going to be great. They're all givens. The fact that people print color matching and brand color matching. Exploit it. Talk about it. Talk about the fact that color matching is really important, and so many products you see don't have quality color matching. It's supposed to be Pantone whatever, and it never is.
Yeah. Interesting you're talking about this. I've got this friend of mine. He's got an agent. Well, he had an agency which has been bought out, and everyone in the agency world was number 1 in this, number 1 in that, and he was number 0 in everything because he had just started. So he created the slogan that he was number 1 in happiness. And everywhere it appeared, number 1 in happiness. So people wanted to talk to this agency that was number 1 in happiness. Ended up 3 months afterwards, one of the big players in the worldwide market of agencies bought them out.
Wow.
Just because of that.
Yeah. So it is all about finding those spots and pulling them together. I'm going to leave some time for questions here because we've got 15 minutes left. But if you want to write a question, put it into the chat box and we'll answer it. If there's anything I've gone over, and I know an hour and a half is not a long time to talk about this, but if there's anything I've not gone over and you think, oh, could you just explain that again? Just put the question there. There's so much in this area. We may actually do a workshop on it, or a free half-day workshop or something, because we can go through real-world examples of how you do this. When we do it with people in like a closed session, we can start to talk about specific competitors, specific clients, specific marketplaces. When you're in a webinar, you have to be a bit guarded about that.
Yeah, you can't share that.
What I don't want is us to find out that I've been dissing Asda on a video and then Asda's legal department get it. But if you've got questions, please put them there. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk about some research methods that you can use to find out. Obviously, with the customers and prospect customers, you can ring them. You can pull up industry statistics. That's good. But you can. How do you deal with a depressed market? This is an interesting one. So if you've got a market that's in a downturn of any kind, whether that be an economic downturn or just a losing trend, for an example, some markets start to decline and you're staying in it, or a depressed market in terms of economics. You have to stand out even more, and you have to. We see this in recessions. So this is universal truth, by the way. In a recession, people pull back from doing things that they should do more. So if you look at any recession and look at the companies that have grown through recessions, they are the companies who've spent more time on sales and marketing. So how do you deal with a depressed market? You have to get more niche down and create some more niche sectors. So for an example, I'm not going to use your example, Thomas, but if you want to, Thomas, you know us well enough anyway. So if you want to have a chat about this, just give us a shout and we'll have a more detailed conversation, because yachts is not an easy one to kind of answer in a short question, a short conversation. But you
mentioned something very important there, which is the more you stand out in a depressed market, the more people see you, and those that are that have the means to purchase, they'll be seeing you and they'll be talking to you.
So first things first, in a depressed market, right? Depending on which side of the fence you're on, Thomas, in terms of your revenue, whether you're getting your revenue from the seller or the buyer. I know ultimately you're getting it from the buyer, but who is your client? Who are you representing? Are you sourcing for the paying customer? In fact, Thomas, can you answer this for me? Who would be classed as your customer? Would it be the seller or the buyer? Because this is both. Okay. So what you need to be is the deal maker. In a depressed market, you have to be the deal maker. You can get the best deals. Whether it be you're looking to buy or sell a yacht, I can get you the best deal. Now, obviously, you can't act on both sides of the fence. So you have to make that clear. But then I would massively shout about being the best deal maker and really know the markets that you're going after and then target it. And I've done this myself in a couple of different markets, whereby I will just talk to one particular audience about one particular thing and make sure that market penetrates those people. Now, in some scenarios, you will be dealing with both sides of the fence in terms of this. One person could be a buyer and a seller. You have to go all in on one front with one group of people. Oddly enough, Thomas, by the way, one of our clients is Princess Yachts, and I'm just down the road from their yacht factory where they make them all. But I would become the deal maker and leverage the fact that you are the deal maker and really ramp that message up so that everybody knows Thomas is the
man to go to.
Yeah. Because the beauty of the deal maker, I know it's very crude terms and it needs more work, but the beauty of the deal maker is for who? buyer or seller.
But it can be for both.
Of course. Yeah. So any other questions? If you want to follow up with this with us, by the way, I'm more than happy, because we're developing new content all the time. I'm more than happy to have follow-up chats, kind of one-to-one if you want to, and kind of go through this in detail with your specific examples.
And also keep a watch on our LinkedIn profiles, which we'll be posting a number of new things going in there, and also our Eventbrite. Yeah. Which we are doing a number of courses, not only in the UK, but in other places as well.
Yeah. So the 4 pillars are really important to you. They're the things that will make sure that you understand how to leverage leverage your business over the competitors. Customer, competitor, market, message. And all of the success of this will be in the quality of the message, which is fed from the customer, the competitor, and the market. But unless there's more questions, I'm going to wrap up 10 minutes early. But
well, normally we leave a lot of space in the end for questions and answers. Yeah. So if there any pop in.
So if you want to message us afterwards, contact us and we will do a one-to-one, because I really want you to get some value out of this. But I would start to think about not what you think about these 4 pillars. It's what the external world thinks about these. Get stats, get facts, get figures, get opinions, but not from people who will tell you what you want to hear. You need to find out externally what people are saying that will not be biased by them talking to you. It will not be biased by them, by your opinions and feelings about it, so that you can really go, this is the space I need to occupy. These are the weak spots I need to exploit. And this is the message I have to send out there. So unless there's more questions, I'm going to wrap up here. Guys, if you want to get in touch with us, Thomas, give us a shout if you want to. And we'll
it's Dean and Vasco.
Yeah, find us on LinkedIn.
I'm the guy that comments on your posts, by the way.
Yeah, find us on LinkedIn, send us a message. And if you want to have a time just to talk through, I'd love to help you in more detail with real world examples. But thank you so much for being part of this, and hope to see you on social or at an event really, really soon.